How's it going, guys? Serious here. This is a Path of Exile 1 video. I'm here to show you my current progress in the current league Mercenaries 3.26. Now, before we talk about the build that I chose to league start, let me show you a bit my atlas. I've already completed all of it, well, almost all of it. I have these 2 remaining unique maps. I will buy them and complete them later on. I've already gotten 2 of my void stones and started doing the invitations. I already have 2 of them complete and I'm working on the others. As for my gear, I already have a 6 linked body armor, an Astromantis, a Garugan's Flight. Those 2 were expensive at league start. I have a decent belt right here that I need to work on later on, and some pretty garbage ring that I need to recraft. I already killed 2 of the new bosses that are available in 2.26. and I currently have the 3rd one unlocked right here. I'm gonna need to go and get him. Now, as for the build that I chose to play, this was PoE guys Siege Ballista Dexterity Stacker. This is a very good build in terms of mapping. In terms of bossing with higher investments, it will do quite alright. I've already killed a few of the bosses. I died once or twice. It was fine. I did not take any credit for this build. This is completely PoE guy. Check him out. He has a ton of content about this build. He has been league starting it for quite a while now, and he is very proficient in it. Later on, with much more investment, we can transition to his Shrapnel Ballista Strength Stacker. This build will offer much more damage and much more survivability. This is a tier 16 map showcase. As you can see, the build has a lot of clear speed. The build itself is fast to move around with. It has pretty nice survivability. We have 4 endurance charges that are up all the time because of Hierophant Ascendancy. We have decent evasion. We have Steel Skin automated. And I have some physical damage reduction for my mercenary. We have 100% spell suppression, and even on single target, meaning bosses and rares, it does quite alright. Now, the totem playstyle is kind of safe because you put your totems on the target and you can maneuver around the attacks without being hit. This is a quite safe playstyle if you want, and the thing with this build especially is that it requires not a lot of investment to get into. You don't need a lot of uniques to get this build online, and the uniques that you really need are very cheap. As you can see here, we melt the boss very fast, very easy. He doesn't hit us, he's very busy with the totems. Here's a fight against the Crusader. As you can see, we melt him really fast and we do not get hit a lot because he's busy hitting the totems, and this was even before I've gotten some of my upgrades. Here's a fight against the Purifier. I will cut the places in the fight where he's invulnerable. As you can see, we maneuver around his attacks really easily because we are not his focus. We just stand aside and move a little bit while our totems do the work. Now let's talk a bit about the build, starting with the items. The mandatory items are a Bisquab that has increased dexterity of 15% and 1% increased damage per 15 dexterity. We'll take an Iron Commander that has +1 to Siege Ballista per 200 dexterity and 1 to 3 physical damage per 25 dexterity. A Fractal Thought that gives us 1% elemental damage per 10 dexterity. And a Poised Prison that gives us 1 to 2 added cold damage per 10 dexterity. And the Herm Sorrow that gives us 100% of our physical damage converted to cold damage. Now for the items that require more currency, being the Garugan's Flight that give us some dexterity and 2 maximum life per 10 dexterity, and will give us some life regen and immunity to Burning Ground, Shocked and Chilled Ground with 30% movement speed. Those are some good boots, but they cost around 1 divine. And finally, the best in slot amulet, of course it being the Astromantis, because it gives us a ton of attributes, and we not only need dexterity because of the stat right here. 15% increased dexterity if strength is higher than intelligence, 51% crit multiplier if dexterity is higher than intelligence. As you can see, both my strength and my dexterity are higher than my intelligence. This is why I'm gaining a lot of bonuses from this helmet. Now as for the belt, ideally you want to get a synthesized belt that has the implicit of percentage increased dexterity, and you want to spam that with the Essence of Sorrow that gives us more dexterity until you're satisfied with the rest of the stats. Now of course this is a quite mediocre belt at most. I need to roll it more once I have more currency, and the same thing goes for the rings. You need synthesized rings with percentage implicit increased dexterity, with all attributes and dexterity added to them. Those are some pretty garbage rings. I will recraft them once I gain more currency. Now let's talk about the passive tree, starting with the Ascendancy. We'll be taking Pursuit of Faith, will give us +1 to maximum totem, and the more important one, 100% totem placement speed. Pairing that with Ritual of Awakening for 5% more damage per summoned totem. We summon right now 15 totems, that gives us a lot of added more damage, and of course will give us a lot of mana regen and life regen. Following that, you need to take Conviction of Power. This is where our permanent endurance and power charges come from, and it will add +1 to the maximum number of each of those charges. And finally we'll take Divine Guidance for a little bit more mana, 10% of damage taken from mana before life, and Transfigured Mind. This is a pretty decent defensive layer that our character can utilize. Moving on to the passive tree, as you can see, is pretty simple. You take a lot of attribute nodes, as many as possible, pathing down to some life nodes, some jewels which we'll use later on, and the Keystone Magebrain. This is where our spell suppression comes from. Once you achieve 1500 dexterity, you will have 100% spell suppression. This is because the build uses a lot of unique items, and it's quite hard to get some spell suppression. We'll path down, taking another jewel node, taking some more life here, taking some life here, some mana, some reservation, and some evasion and elemental resistance. And here we need to get a medium cluster jewel that gives us Sleepless Centuries. This will make us to gain Onslaught when we summon a totem. Onslaught is very powerful. It will grant us attack speed and movement speed. Next we'll take Point Blank. This will be an increase in our damage. We'll take the Attributes wheel right here with the increased Attribute Mastery. The critical nodes right here are very important, with the 1% projectile damage per 16 dexterity mastery. And finally we'll be moving up here and taking some more life, some crits, a jewel socket, some evasion and elemental resistance, and some attack speed, and the multi-shot node. And finally we'll be taking this wheel right here that provides us some critical chance and critical multiplier, in addition to some attack speed and one more additional arrow. Now as for the jewels are very important for us to gain more dexterity. We'll be taking 3 Fluid Motion that will transform all the notables of strength to dexterity. As you can see right here, if I remove this will be strength. When I put it on, all of them will be transformed to dexterity. We'll be using one right here as well, and one down here. And in addition, I grabbed one Careful Planning to transform this small int node into a dexterity node. And finally we'll be taking Brutal Restraint Timeless Jewel. This jewel will add some dexterity to our small nodes, and will add an additional stat to our bigger notables. Now you can use this jewel right here instead of this one, because we have more big notables allocated. You don't need these two. I've allocated them because of the 5% increased dexterity right here, but initially you want this jewel to be placed here because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, I've chosen to place it here because of all the good benefits it gives us. As you can see, we have here a chance to blind. When enemies are blinded, they have less accuracy and they have less evasion. This is a decent offensive option. Here it will give us more movement speed, here it gives us more dexterity, here it will give us some cold resistance, and here more dexterity. So not counting the +4 dexterity on all the small nodes, we have 10% increased dexterity from this jewel alone. If I remove it, we'll drop down to 1554 dex. Now of course later on I will be investing more in a better jewel. I will be putting it right here and unspecking those two nodes. And I will be putting here a Light of Meaning that gives us 4% chaos resistance for each small notable allocated in its radius. Because this build lacks chaos resistance, you can solve that with the flask, however I have chosen to ignore it for now. And finally we'll be using a split personality. Now ideally you want to have on this one +5 dexterity and +5 to maximum life, however this is expensive. I've chosen to take energy shield right now. I will be buying another one later on. It's very important for you to put this jewel right here because it will increase its effect by 25% for each allocated passive between your class location and the jewel. Now before we talk about our Merc setup, I'll be talking about the champs. First of all, let's start with our main damage, the Siege Ballista. Now this is very important that you have the Siege Ballista with 20% quality because it will give you additional attack speed per maximum totem. We summoned 15 totems right now. This will give us a lot of attack speed. You want to link that with awakened cold damage support. If you cannot afford one, you'll use just added cold damage support. Faster attacks, increased critical strike support for more critical strike chance, of course. Inspiration, so that the skill we use cost less mana, and we'll be gaining inspiration charges when we summon a totem. Inspiration charges will grant you elemental damage per inspiration charge. And finally, elemental damage with attacks. For more elemental damage, when you can afford one, you can buy an awakened elemental damage with attacks. Next we have our auras. We'll be using Purity of Elements to give us more resistances because of course we use a lot of uniques. It's hard to come by resistances, and it will grant us elemental ailment immunity because Scorch, Freeze and Shock are very dangerous. Next we'll be using Grace for more evasion, of course. Now for our movement skill, we'll be using Dash. We'll be linking that with Second Wind because it will give us an additional dash, and Blood Rage to spam off cooldown to gain more attack speed. And finally for our utility, we'll be using Frenzy linked with Ice Golem, Mana Forge arrows, and Cast on Crit and Frostbite. So when we crit on an enemy, we'll be summoning the Ice Golem. The Ice Golem will give us an increased critical strike chance. The Frenzy will allow us to gain Frenzy charges, and the Frostbite Curse that lower enemies cold resistance because the damage that we deal is mainly cold because of our gloves. Now all of that will be linked of course with Cast on Crit. All of this will be triggered when we crit on an enemy, and we are critting a lot. And on the gloves we're using Steel Skin with automation so that we don't spam it, it will automate by itself. And we're using Portal with Cast on Death. This is so when you die and you enter a map again, you will spawn where you left. Now as for the anointment on our amulet, we'll be using Shaman's Domination. This is the best in slot anoint because it gives us more critical strike chance and more critical strike multiplier. As for the flask, it's very important to have corrupted blood immunity on your life flask, a jade flask for more evasion, a quicksilver flask for more movement speed, and a granite flask for more armor. And finally this one right here gives me critical strike chance. Now I've been meaning to remove that and replace it with the flask that grants chaos resistance. And finally it's very important that you automate your flasks. You can go to the crafting branch and craft, use when charge reaches full so you don't keep spamming them off cooldown. As for my mercenary, I have chosen Zari because she has the Hatred aura that gives us extra cold damage, of course. She uses Valgrace that gives us an additional chance to evade attacks. And of course she uses Ice Shot, so she has a lot of cold damage. I put on her the Lesser Cast Festival Mask because it gives us 50% increased damage. And I used the Rash Kaldor's Patience Amulet because of the line always freezes, shocks and ignites, so she will be dealing a lot of ailments to the enemies. And I've allocated her with Ash, Frost and Storm for more elemental damage and for more chance to shock and ignite and increase effect of non-damaging ailments. This paired with the Pyro Shock clasp leather belt makes that the ignited enemies deal their physical damage as fire, and shocked enemies deal their physical damage as lightning damage. This is a defensive layer sort of to mitigate a bit of my physical damage taken. I've equipped her with a quiver that has some physical damage, some elemental damage, and some attack speed, and a quiver that has some flat cold damage, fire damage, life, and some more attack speed. Now a boot that is whatever, I just put on her for now. The ring and the gloves I haven't worked on, and the body armor also. She has 4.8k life, decent evasion, some chaos resistance. I still need to work on her cold resistance, and I have her fire and lightning resistance capped. I believe for the siege ballista this is the best mercenary in slot for now. This needs to be tested some more. This was my 3.26 league starter. Now I like to league start builds that are kind of off meta, because meta builds tend to get really expensive, especially for league start. Again, I credit all this build to PoE Guy. I did not create anything from this build, I just replicated it to see how good it actually was. And spoiler alert, it's very good. If you haven't started the league yet, or you're starting pretty soon, I would recommend you try this. This is very nice for very cheap items. Go ahead and check out PoE Guy's builds. All of them are on this channel. They are very good, and he tells you step by step on what to do from start to finish. I will have his channel linked in my description. As always, like if you like, subscribe if you want, and thank you for watching.